The year is 1919. The Great War has ended, leaving Europe scarred and exhausted. The Treaty of Versailles sows seeds of resentment and instability. Germany faces crippling reparations and territorial losses. The continent of Europe was in a state of chaos and uncertainty. Political tensions were high and the economic instability was palpable. Amidst this backdrop, the seeds of discontent began to take root, setting the stage for a dramatic and tumultuous period in history. The Treaty of Versailles imposed harsh penalties on Germany, leading to widespread resentment and economic hardship. The Weimar Republic struggled to maintain stability, and extremist ideologies began to gain traction. Amidst this climate of discontent, Adolf Hitler and the National Socialist German Workers' Party, NSDAP, started to rise in prominence. Promising to restore Germany's former glory, they attracted a growing following. Adolf Hitler's charismatic oratory and propaganda skills played a crucial role in his rise to power. He capitalized on the economic woes and nationalistic fervor of the German people, positioning himself as the savior of the nation. The NSDAP's influence grew, and by 1933 Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany, marking the beginning of a new and ominous era. January 30th, 1933. Hitler is appointed Chancellor of Germany, marking the end of the Weimar Republic. Once in power, Hitler moved swiftly to consolidate his control. The Reichstag fire of 1933 provided a pretext for the Enabling Act, which granted Hitler dictatorial powers. Political opponents were silenced, and the foundations of a totalitarian regime were laid. The Nazi Party's grip on Germany tightened, and the stage was set for the radical transformation of the nation. With the opposition crushed, Hitler focused on solidifying his regime. The Gestapo and SS were instrumental in enforcing Nazi policies and eliminating dissent. The Nuremberg Laws institutionalized racial discrimination, targeting Jews and other minorities. The propaganda machine, led by Joseph Goebbels, ensured that the Nazi ideology permeated every aspect of German society. The rearmament of Germany was a key component of Hitler's plans. The Wehrmacht, Germany's military, was rebuilt and expanded in defiance of the Treaty of Versailles. This militarization was accompanied by aggressive foreign policies, including the remilitarization of the Rhineland and the annexation of Austria. The world watched with growing concern as Germany's power and ambitions grew. Economic miracle or Faustian bargain. The Nazi regime's economic policies led to a significant reduction in unemployment and a period of apparent prosperity. Public works projects and rearmament transformed the German landscape. However, this economic miracle was built on a foundation of exploitation and oppression. Forced labor, plundering of occupied territories, and the persecution of minorities were integral to the regime's economic strategy. The true cost of this prosperity would soon become evident as the illusion of prosperity came crashing down. As Germany's power grew, so did its territorial ambitions. The Munich Agreement of 1938 allowed the annexation of the Sudetenland. The policy of appeasement pursued by Britain and France failed to curb Hitler's aggression. On September 1, 1939, German forces invade Poland. France and Great Britain declare war on Germany, marking the beginning of World War II. The invasion of Poland marked the beginning of a conflict that would engulf the entire continent. The early years of World War II saw a series of stunning victories for Germany. The Blitzkrieg tactics, characterized by rapid and overwhelming force, led to the swift conquest of Poland, France, and other nations. The Nazi regime's dominance seemed unassailable, and the Third Reich reached the zenith of its power. However, the seeds of its eventual downfall were already being sown. In North Africa, the Afrika Korps engages British forces, marking the beginning of a grueling desert war. The Eastern Front seeds of destruction. On June 22, 1941, Nazi Germany launches Operation Barbarossa. The initial German advance is swift and devastating, but the harsh Russian winter and fierce Soviet resistance lead to devastating losses. The Battle of Moscow marks the first major German defeat. The entry of the United States into the war further tips the balance against Germany. The seeds of the Third Reich's destruction are sown in the blood-soaked soil of the East. The tide of war begins to turn, from triumph to trepidation. The initial triumphs of the Nazi regime gave way to a growing sense of trepidation. The Allied forces launched a series of counteroffensives, including the D-Day invasion of Normandy in 1944. Relentless bombing campaigns targeted German cities, crippling the war effort. The population was demoralized. The once invincible Third Reich was now on the defensive, facing an increasingly dire situation. The walls close in. The Axis crumbles. The final years of World War II saw the gradual disintegration of the Axis powers. The new year, 1943, dawned with the news of the German surrender at Stalingrad, a crushing blow to German morale and a strategic disaster for the Third Reich. The tide had turned, and the walls were closing in on Hitler's thousand-year Reich. In July 1943, the Allies launched Operation Husky, the invasion of Sicily, the first step in their long-awaited liberation of Europe. American and British forces landing on the beaches of Sicily faced fierce resistance from Italian and German defenders, but the outcome was never in doubt. The Italian campaign, though costly and protracted, would ultimately knock Mussolini's Italy out of the war and open up a new front against Germany. Meanwhile, in the Atlantic, the tide began to turn in the Battle of the Atlantic. Allied naval forces, bolstered by new technologies like radar and sonar, inflicted heavy losses on German U-boats, slowly but surely strangling Germany's ability to wage war at sea. The lifeline that had sustained Germany's war effort was being severed, and the noose was tightening. On the Eastern Front, the Red Army, reinvigorated by their victory at Stalingrad, launched a series of offensives that pushed the Germans back across the vast steppes of Russia and Ukraine. The Battle of Kursk, the largest tank battle in history, saw the German army suffer a decisive defeat, shattering their hopes of regaining the initiative in the east. The myth of German invincibility lay shattered on the blood-soaked battlefields of the east. In the west, the Battle of the Bulge marked another turning point as Allied forces pushed back the last major German counter-offensive. The relentless pressure from all sides left Germany in a state of collapse. The end of the war was in sight, but the cost had been immense. Fortress Germany, our Reich Divided. By 1944, the Third Reich was a fortress under siege, its armies battered and retreating on all fronts. The Allied bombing campaign, relentless and devastating, had reduced German cities to rubble, crippling its industrial capacity and shattering the morale of its civilian population. The dream of a thousand-year Reich was crumbling into dust. On June 6, 1944, D-Day, the long-awaited Allied invasion of Normandy, France, marked the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany. Over 150,000 Allied troops, supported by a vast armada of ships and aircraft, stormed the beaches of Normandy, establishing a foothold in Western Europe that would never be relinquished. The liberation of France, though hard-fought and costly, was a testament to the courage and sacrifice of Allied soldiers. Within Germany, the cracks in the Nazi facade were widening. The failed July 20th plot, an attempt by German officers to assassinate Hitler and seize control of the government, revealed the growing discontent within the ranks of the military and the elite. Though brutally suppressed, the plot was a sign that even within the heart of the Third Reich, opposition to Hitler's rule was simmering. As Allied armies closed in from the west and the Red Army advanced from the east, the German people faced the bitter consequences of Hitler's war. Food and supplies were scarce, cities lay in ruins, and the constant threat of Allied bombing raids hung over their lives. The propaganda machine, once so effective, could no longer conceal the reality of Germany's impending defeat. Internal divisions and infighting plagued the Nazi leadership, weakening their grip on power. The liberation of concentration camps revealed the horrors of the Holocaust, further eroding any remaining support for the regime. The fall of Berlin in 1945 marked the definitive end of the Third Reich. The Führer's demise, Twilight of the Gods. By the spring of 1945, the Third Reich was in its death throes. Soviet forces, having battled their way across Eastern Europe, reached the outskirts of Berlin, their red banners flying over the ruins of the Nazi heartland. Hitler, holed up in his underground bunker, his dreams of a thousand-year empire shattered, issued delusional orders to phantom armies, clinging to the bitter end to his twisted ideology. On April 30th, 1945, with Soviet troops just a few blocks away, Adolf Hitler, the man who had unleashed such horror upon the world, committed suicide in his Berlin bunker, signaling the collapse of the Nazi leadership. His reign of terror, built on hate, racism, and aggression, had finally come to an end, leaving behind a legacy of death, destruction, and enduring shame. The remaining officials attempted to negotiate a surrender, but the Allies demanded unconditional capitulation. On May 7, 1945, General Alfred Jodl, representing the German High Command, signed the unconditional surrender documents in Reims, France, officially ending World War II in Europe. The world, weary from 6 years of war, rejoiced at the news, but the scars of conflict, both physical and psychological, would take generations to heal. The once mighty regime crumbled, and the surviving leaders were captured and brought to justice. The rise and fall of the Third Reich, a cautionary tale of ambition, ideology, and the dangers of unchecked power, stands as a stark reminder of the fragility of peace and the enduring human capacity for both good and evil. By the early months of 1945, the once mighty Third Reich was a shadow of its former self. The relentless Allied bombing campaigns had transformed cities into smoldering ruins, factories lay shattered, and the once proud German war machine sputtered, starved of fuel and resources. The streets, once bustling with life, were eerily silent, save for the rumble of distant artillery and the shuffle of refugees fleeing the advancing Allied armies. The weight of defeat hung heavy in the air, a stark contrast to the early years of triumph and intoxicating propaganda. The promises of a 1,000-year Reich rang hollow amidst the ruins. The German people, weary of war and its deprivations, faced a bleak and uncertain future. The Nazi grip on power, once absolute, was weakening, as even the most ardent believers began to question the pronouncements of their Führer, hidden away in his Berlin bunker. Within the shattered remnants of the Reich, chaos reigned. The once feared Gestapo and SS, their ranks depleted and morale shattered, resorted to increasingly desperate measures to maintain order and suppress dissent. Fanatical Nazis, blinded by ideology and facing defeat, clung to the bitter end, dragging countless innocent civilians down with them. Yet amidst the ruins and despair, glimmers of hope flickered. Resistance movements, long suppressed by the Nazi regime, emerged from the shadows, challenging the authority of their oppressors. Ordinary Germans, their lives shattered by war, displayed remarkable resilience and compassion, aiding their neighbors and clinging to the belief in a better future. The human spirit, though tested by the horrors of war, proved ultimately unbreakable. In the aftermath of World War II, Germany lay in ruins. The country was divided into occupation zones, and the process of denazification began. The Nuremberg trials held Nazi leaders accountable for their crimes. The German people faced the daunting task of rebuilding their nation and coming to terms with the legacy of the Third Reich. The scars of the war would take generations to heal, but the resilience and determination of the German people marked the beginning of a long and arduous journey towards recovery. As Soviet forces encircled Berlin, fierce street-to-street fighting ensued. The once mighty capital of the Third Reich transformed into a nightmarish battleground. The city, once a symbol of Nazi power and ambition, was now a desperate island of resistance, defended by a hodgepodge of Wehrmacht, Waffen-SS units, and the Hitler Youth. Alongside them, hastily armed civilians and the Volkssturm fought with desperation. Inside the Führerbunker, deep beneath the Chancellery Gardens, a delusional Adolf Hitler, his mind warped by paranoia and amphetamines, directed the defense of his crumbling Reich with an iron fist. Surrounded by his dwindling inner circle, he clung to the delusional belief that Germany could still achieve victory, even as Soviet shells rained down on the city above. The Battle of Berlin raged for weeks, a brutal and apocalyptic struggle that reduced the city to rubble. Soviet troops, fueled by a thirst for revenge after years of brutal fighting and horrific losses, engaged in fierce street fighting, pushing block by block toward the heart of the Nazi beast. The air was thick with the stench of cordite, smoke, and death. Amidst the chaos and carnage, ordinary Berliners trapped in the crossfire endured unimaginable suffering. Families huddled in cellars and underground stations, seeking shelter from the relentless bombardment. Food and water were scarce, medical supplies non-existent, and the constant threat of death hung over the city like a shroud. The nightmare that Hitler had unleashed upon the world was reaching its terrible climax. The fall of Berlin marked the end of the war in Europe and the complete defeat of Nazi Germany. With the fall of Berlin and the suicides of Adolf Hitler and his inner circle, the nightmare of the Third Reich finally came to an end. The world, weary from 6 years of global conflict, breathed a collective sigh of relief. The legacy of Nazi tyranny would continue to cast a long shadow over Germany and the world, The full horror of the Nazi regime's crimes against humanity shocked the world. The world vowed never again, but the fight against intolerance continues. The collapse of the Third Reich reshaped Europe and ushered in the Cold War. Germany, divided and occupied, became a focal point of tension between the Western and Eastern blocs. The spectre of nuclear annihilation hung over the world. The legacy of the Third Reich is one of devastation and horror. The Holocaust, the war crimes, and the destruction wrought by the conflict left an indelible mark on history. The lessons learned from this dark period continue to shape the world today. The memory of the victims and the resilience of the survivors serve as a reminder of the importance of vigilance against tyranny and hatred. The Third Reich, a regime built on hate, racism, and boundless ambition, had fallen as swiftly and dramatically as it had risen. The world, reeling from the unprecedented devastation of World War II, embarked on a journey of reconstruction and reconciliation. The legacy of the Third Reich would continue to shape the world, a stark reminder of the fragility of peace. In the aftermath of the war, the world grappled with the enormity of the Nazi crimes, particularly the horrors of the Holocaust. The Nuremberg trials sought to hold the architects of the Holocaust accountable. The trials marked a turning point in international law, establishing the principle that individuals could be held accountable for crimes against humanity. The world, forever scarred by the horrors of the Holocaust, vowed never again. But the fight against intolerance, racism, and genocide continues to this day. It is a fight that demands constant vigilance, education, and a commitment to upholding human rights and dignity for all. Amidst the ruins and the reckoning, there were also stories of hope, resilience, and the indomitable human spirit. The rebuilding of Europe was a testament to the determination of a generation to create a better future. The United Nations was established to promote peace and prevent future conflicts. Founded on the principles of peace, cooperation, and respect for human rights, the rise and fall of the Third Reich stands as a cautionary tale for all time. A reminder of the dangers of unchecked power, blind ideology, and the corrosive effects of hate. It is a history we must never forget, lest we repeat the mistakes of the past. The echoes of tyranny remind us to remain vigilant in the face of extremism, to defend democratic values, and to work tirelessly for a more just and peaceful world. For in the words of philosopher George Santayana, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it.